school starting today from the one-week half-term. And also principals will have to find alternative ways to keep schools running after government said that it will not be able to disperse the 22,244 shillings capitation per learner per year, but instead stick to 17,000 shillings per year for every learner. All right. On my show, I have Reverend Mark Enchakara, who is also here with me in studio, as well as Honorable Francis Mwangangi, representing the great people of Machakos County. Javas Bigambo has just walked in. He'll tell us where he was shortly. But that is the nature of it. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Reverend, welcome. Karibu sana to Good Morning Kenya. DG, how are you doing?
Good.
It's been years. It's been a while.
But all is well with all the challenges.
All is well?
Yes.
Yes. Reverend Mark Okuru Enchakara is also here with us. Last time we were here, you said that you're not a Gen Z.
No, I'm not a Gen Z. I'm a father to 2 Gen Zs.
Yes.
Yes, I've got
You have to make that clear.
Yeah, sure.
Did you release them to the streets?
No, well, my daughter had to go to work, and I had to lock all the exits for my son and lock myself in the bedroom to make sure he doesn't exit.
The key word is you have to lock all the exits. Okay. DG, how about you?
I'm also a father of 2. By the time all this was happening, I was out of the country. And when I came, he told me he joined his friends. And they did what they had to do, express themselves, because we have failed to listen to them.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm curious to hear how that conversation started. Because while you're away,
you
who
know,
approached the other?
I'm the one, because I wanted to find out how and why.
Yes.
In fact, it started as a joke at a public place. A public place is somewhere we go for shaping. So, but I was surprised. I was the only odd one out in a grouping of almost 20 people. They seems to have a lot of support, these agencies. And then I'm promising to, where I can, at my level, at the very lower level, to maybe engage them more.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. While you're away, you'll also tell us how the image of our country is being seen there. And I believe that happened while you were also representing the country in a different forum. But then, what was the perception and what was the, the image of Kenya once that happened? And currently, how is it? Javas Bigambo, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, sir. Good morning.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
You're not a Gen Z as well. You have to make it clear.
Well, that clarity is subject to discourse. I think I am oscillating within that bracket. Perhaps just exiting the so-called Gen Z space.
Yes.
Perhaps if my parents would have relaxed a bit, I would have found myself caught within that rat trap. But of course, when we look at the issues that are happening today in the country, and as you've asked Reverend Enchakara and the Honorable DG, what I consider upon that reflection is that, unlike Timothy, who had the feet of Paul of Tarsus, beneath which to sit, most of the young people in this country, the Gen Zs so-called, have no feet, for example, beneath which to sit. And I think we're going to have a very interesting discourse this morning.
Yeah, exactly. Now that you've just spoken, what do you make of this front page of the Daily Nation? Gachagua opens up on his tiff with the President William Ruto. Very quickly.
Well, I think we're living in very interesting times.
Yeah.
I think volatility is the kind of meal that we like consuming as a nation. We are always in political volatile situations. And the framers of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 did not contemplate that we would have such kind of toing and froing within the executive or the presidency, with the bad example that was set in the second term of Jubilee administration's period under President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto as they then were. And I think we need to rethink as a nation with that kind of headline. This kind of push and pull within the executive or the presidency does not work well for the democracy, for service delivery, and I think it is offensive even to the imagination of we, the people, under Article 1 of the Constitution, what we desired of the presidency or the executive to work.
Okay. I don't know what you think about this one, DG? It's something that has been there for a bit of some time, and he is now coming out. What we saw last week was the president spoke first, had a press briefing in State House, and within a span of 1 hour later, the deputy president was also having another one in Mombasa. And almost everything he said was almost to counter what the president has said, or lack of it there.
Truth be said, the threat to the existence of nationhood in this country is the threat to that headline. I support we need to rethink, because of late, you hear the president saying hi, hi, hi. During campaigns and the first months of their administration, it was we. And when you hear the word I, my policies, my, I will do, then you know the problem there it is. And I think the president gave a commitment and a promise to Kenya that what he underwent as a deputy president under his watch, that will not happen. But we are seeing it happening. We are seeing it. Talk about what is it? Arbitrarily arrests. Talk about forced arrests. Talk about disregarding other constitutional institutions. Today, if you ask anybody in Kenya, it is like it is only one person who speaks for the government. Yet, the people in this republic have officers that are supposed to speak for specific issues. We have even a spokesperson for State House, but he has all accepted all that. It is he who doing everything. And then the same, when you see that kind of headline, why I'm saying it is a threat is because these are great national leaders elected by Kenyans. None of them is an appointee of the other. So in this case, there has to be some respect when it comes to the running affairs of this country, because you are leading Kenyans. Consult them. The issue of, I quote an issue during this what was it? After the government, coalition government, that was formed after the famous 2007-2008 chaos. I remember one afternoon, the current president, he was a minister in the government, and there was questioning about the elections in this country. They were questioning the prime minister. And I remember that then the minister, I think he was minister either for higher education or agriculture, he asked whether there is the country is prepared to have an election either 2012 or 2013. And the prime minister gave his thoughts. And the minister stood, the current president stood and said, we are not asking about your thoughts. We are asking about a plan, whether the country has a plan, we are going to have an election or not. So nowadays, even as we looked at that debate, it was the issue of I.
Yes.
I think whoever is advising the president should advise him more and he should listen more.
We'll get into that.
Yes.
Yes, Reverend. There's no stability in the kingdom. Is it a replica of what happened between President Uhuru Kenyatta and now President William Ruto? History in the making again.
No, I don't think it is, because as it is right now, neither the president nor his deputy have expressly accused each other. The president on his part, has avoided wading into that conversation. And from the deputy's narration of what is happening, he has never directly or even indirectly indicted the president. He has continuously emphasized that the people around the president, and today you've read in the paper, he said the people who joined government recently have been trying to undermine his authority. So which basically does imply that he is beginning to smell a rat, or to suspect that the Johnnies come late are trying to elbow him out of his position, or to undermine him, hopefully with the desire to benefit from the spoils. So for me, that is my reading into it. I wouldn't like to drag His Excellency into it, and I would like to really maybe to differ a bit with DG, because His Excellency the President is government spokesman number one. In case he feels that there is a situation where what he is doing is not properly represented to the people, and an opportunity presents itself for him to explain himself and to bring clarity to the Kenyan people as the head of government, he feels he is obliged to take that opportunity. And yesterday, he personally did allude to the fact that one of the greatest undoings of his current regimes, that is probably at the heart of the challenges that the government is experiencing now, is the lack of proper communication or clarity in government communication, as far as making sure that Kenyans understand what government is up to, what policies they have put in place, or what plans they have in place. So he clearly indicated that that was the biggest problem that we have. And from where I sit, I also feel that that is exactly the problem.
But who are these people he blamed who joined the government? The keyword, people who recently.
No. Unfortunately, we cannot begin to speculate, because he did not mention or did not leave any traces that we can track and try to suspect it's one person or the other. Besides, we do not have a new coalition. The Kenya Kwanza coalition was created or formed before we went into the election. So if there is anyone who joined government lately, maybe we can begin to suspect the people who have begun to, who initially were supporters of Azimio, but currently are gravitating towards government and working together with government.
You see, okay, all right. All right, Jeffers, I'll get back to that very briefly. Again, on the front page of the Standard newspaper, Ruto at pains to explain kidnaps, deaths and graft. That was yesterday. Ruto at pains to explain kidnaps, deaths and graft. In an interview, President William Ruto was pressed hard to shed light on state sanctions, abductions, corruption in government, and his relationship with his deputy. Again, he promised a cabinet shake-up, a dialogue and a purge. And now the church is also condemning police brutality, calls for soberness. That is what you have here on the front page. Again, Alfred Keter making on the front page today, mystery of state agents in crime. That was in broad daylight. Again, the president also was at pains, and the president taking there. On the front page of the Star newspaper, very quickly, wrote at NHIF, puzzle of 7 billion shillings payment. Management of on the spot for attributing some excess payouts to typing errors. You remember that word? Yeah?
It's a familiar one.
That word, it sounds familiar, right?
Yeah, sure.
Javas, again, it was a computer error. This takes us back to years ago.
It takes us back to years ago, and of course we know that familiarity by its nature breeds contempt. The familiarity by which some of our computers in high offices are prone to making typing errors or computer errors is something that we must perpetually frown upon. And looking at it all, it takes us back to even issues that His Excellency the President was discussing last night, issues that newspapers have canvassed over the past couple of weeks and months, issues of accountability, issues that take us to Article 10, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution. Those fundamental principles of good governance, things that we all cherish, things that we know that if we fully embrace them, and if every state officer and public servant were to fully embrace them, this country will move forward. Of course, we must not find ourselves as slaves to the cult of inevitability in the wheels of progress. But I think looking at issues that are happening, even as the newspapers have captured them, is a vital invitation to a national discourse. That we must summon ourselves, and in fact, not just summon ourselves, events and facts have summoned us to the table of minds. We need to discuss, or discourse if you like, what is it that has perpetually ailed our nation? Things such as lack of a transparency, lack of accountability, disease, poverty, greed. These challenges, Victor, are not new. But looking at the tail end of the first quarter of the 21st century, we must find new methods of confronting the challenges that bedevil our governance structures.
Yes.
We embraced a new constitution in 2010, but we never laundered ourselves. We never took ourselves to the laundry. That we had new wine, but the wine skins remained old. Our character remains old. And while I know that when you are president, no choices are easy, you must make those tough and difficult choices for the sake of country. But you must also have men and women who help you to move that country forward. Today, as we sit here, it is easy to point fingers of accusation at the president because, yes, he's head of state and government. It is easy to point fingers of accusation at, say, the executive. But when you look at the three arms of government, you realize that we have major problems. Today, let me tell you, the executive, national treasurer, for instance, may propose certain tax measures to inform a new tax policy in the country, contained, since in their Finance Bill 2024, as it then was. But that bill cannot see light of day unless it's sanctioned by Parliament. So it means that we need, and when you look at J.J. Rousseau in his thinking about matters social contract, you realize that when the people were having a social contract with their elected leaders at the ballot, upon that promissory note that was made during the campaigns, members of the National Assembly and the Senate, just as it is with members of the County Assembly, they had a direct commitment and social contract with the people.
All right.
When they come to the August House, and I heard all of them, took oath of office, just as the president, and they concluded by saying, "So help me God."
So help me God. So
the Constitution,
on that
God,
on that note,
and their minds is what should be helping them discuss and vote on issues on the floor of the House for the benefit of the people.
Can we take a break for the benefit of the show? We'll be right back with me. The Deputy President also said that a number of MPs did not report or show up at his Bomet meeting yesterday. We will take a look at that, but later on. The biggest elephant in the room right now is the discussion around the country. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more. Has been a week or so. Let me start with you, DG. Now that while you're away, I know you are watching from outside there. First question, what did you take home? And what has been the image of Kenya on the international platform, wherever you are?
The image was negative. People did not expect, first and foremost, the day it happened, Whoever broke the news to me is a former minister in Israeli government. He came in and openly, a forum that had so many delegates from so many countries, put a question directly to me. What is happening to Kenya? The other day you are elevated as an ally of NATO, and so those kind of things. So it wasn't that positive. So I think we need to work on that. And as leaders, we need to be respectful.
Yes.
There is something I will slightly have a different opinion from my colleagues. Immediately you get elected, that is not a ticket for you to do what you think is right. There is in the law, in our constitution and other acts of parliament that dictate before you implement anything in this country, as long as it is touching on the public, please ask them, consult them, okay? We are where we are now as a country simply because somebody engaged Kenyans and their views was not taken on board. We are where we are because we know that we have used the issue of committees, setting up national committees. They come up with a report and you keep it somewhere. Why Generation Z are against even what is being called by the government to come and talk is because of what has happened previously. The other day there were demonstrations across the streets. A committee was formed. What is the level of implementation of whatever they presented? Will this team come on the table, discuss with the government, come up with a very good report, and it is also kept somewhere? So I think as leaders, it is good. Those good thoughts that the deputy governor or the MCA or anybody elected us, please subject them to public input. Yes.
Reverend, when I listened to the president's speech yesterday, the word conversation came more than 15 times in the entire interview. Conversation. What do you make of that?
I think what the president was emphasizing is the reality that we are confronted with when we look at the current circumstances that are playing out in our nation. His Excellency did emphasize that Gen Zs, what the Gen Zs have done is a wake-up call to the whole country to have a candid conversation, not just about the fact that there was no public participation in the enactment of the finance bill or its crafting, but rather His Excellency invited the country to have a wider conversation on all matters, because the finance bill should not be looked at in isolation, has to be looked at in a context, and so that people do not understand. And that's why he pivoted back to the issue of communication, because if people do not understand what is our national debt situation, they might never appreciate the tough choices that those who come up with the finance bill or the tax regime that informs the collection of revenue in a financial year have to make. And making decisions is not easy. And His Excellency did say as much. It's not easy. We have two choices here. The reality is that our national debt is not sustainable. And His Excellency tracked back the history of our national debt from the time when former President Uhuru Kenyatta and himself took over power in 2012 or 2013 until 2022. How it went from 1 point something trillion to 10 trillion, and how many roads they constructed, how many homes they connected with water and electricity. So he brought us to the place where we are and our national debt situation, and told Kenyans that there is a need for us to have a conversation that is objective and to be circumspect in our view of things, so that we do not just we don't just have a pipeline view of things, just looking at one thing, and we forget that that thing is a product of a wider context.
Yes.
So His Excellency said he believes that this is the best opportunity for us as a nation to have a candid conversation about everything, including governance, including the issues of accountability and transparency in government, so that when the president tells you we have to increase taxes, he has to tell you why. Track back and explain to you and tell you, a few years ago, for every 100 shillings we collected, we spent 50 shillings to pay debt. But now, for every 100 shillings we collect, we spend 70 shillings to pay debt, which means the 30 shillings that is left is what is left for us to take care of recurrent expenditure, to take care of our development expenditure, and all that. So that when people see that the government has proposed certain taxes, they understand why the government is going that direction. Because the implication, remember last time when I was here, I said that we have a problem here that people do not understand. That every time we have a budget deficit, that deficit on top becomes part of our national debt because the government has to borrow to finance it. As it is right now, we already have passed our budget. The budget is passed and it is already there. Now the government has to fund that budget. Since the finance bill is done with, and His Excellency yesterday did say clearly that if the finance bill would have passed and would have been implemented, we would have had to borrow 600 billion shillings as a deficit. But now that we have a deficit that has gone to almost $1 trillion, it means we now have to borrow almost $1 trillion, which means our national debt is increasing further. So people have to understand that we are quickly hurtling towards a debt trap, which has very, very will have very negative implications on our financial outlook as a nation.
To me, sounds like a very soft approach of, guys, be ready, because $1 trillion shillings is going to be borrowed.
It's a reality, and that is what he said as much.
Javas, when you look, over the weekend, Head of Public Service, that is Felix Kosgei, gave a press a memo that there's going to be a national dialogue and another quote-unquote, that is the multinational forum that's going to be formed to bring all the youth. And part of the agenda, when you look at it, number one of them is jobs and other opportunities. Number two was the nation's tax policy. Number three is the national debt burden, representation and accountability, anti-corruption measures, and any other agenda items as deemed appropriate. But now the thing is, the representatives were going to be picked from every county was going to bring 2 delegates. So for example, in Nairobi, you're going to pick 2 people in Nairobi to represent the youth. We saw what happened over the week. How are they going to represent millions of Kenyans who went to the street? And with this, don't you think that phase of dialogue and conversation is way over? And now these people on the street, the decision or the step that should be taken by the government should be different from conversation and dialogue.
Well, Victor, first I said that when you're president, no choices are easy. And looking at or putting into perspective the proposition by the head of public service, Honorable Kosgei, it is one proposition that of a path that we could follow. And we as a nation right now, we are like Alice in Wonderland, wondering where is it that we must divert or go for the sake and for the betterment of our nation. We must ameliorate our state of governance. That's a fact. But like yesterday, the president spoke. He said one thing. He said that whatever the people will want to propose as the best approach for this conversation, he is ready and willing to listen. That aspect of listening is very important. That if the people propose that the approach of 100 people or 100 member committee is not proper, then still the president has said that he's willing to listen to the alternatives. The other thing is this, that, Victor, you know, crises by their nature make leaders. In 2007, I saw a vacillating president by the name of Mwai Kibaki, caught in a crisis of post-election violence and had to make a decision and a choice, of course, in consultation with the team of eminent persons on what is it that's good for the country. Hence, the Grand Coalition government. 2024, I see yet another vacillating president by the name of Honorable William Ruto, who has to make a choice. And yes, in consultation with other key leaders and citizens, of course, on issues that have been fronted or headlined by the Gen Z, on what is it that we must focus on with respect to matters of unemployment, respect to matters of the youth bulge, respect to matters of the state of the economy and the debt burden.
Yes.
Looking at these issues and the pent-up anger amongst ordinary citizens, the youth as they have done, looking at the mechanisms proposed in our constitution itself, which is, it tells you that one, just as the president said yesterday that he's ready and is going to do some soul searching, it is time for every leader in this country to do some soul searching, and every citizen. Yesterday you saw, as it's been reported in the papers, that the president was at pains to explain issues of the state of governance, the state of rights and responsibilities as it is in the Bill of Rights, the rights of the police, the property rights of those whose property was destroyed, the rights of citizens who want to picket and demonstrate. All these issues weigh heavily on the president's shoulders. And as it was said, the adage holds, an easy lays the head that wears the crown. And that's where we are. And that's why we as a people have, first of all, got to have direction from the president as the compass of the nation on matters leadership and governance, because we gave him the constitution and the sword. And the proposition by the head of public service is, of course, welcome for consideration. And if the people think that there are other better ways for engagement, then that proposition also can be put on the table.
Yes.
Because the progress of this country is about the people and all of us. And the president indicated yesterday that that's the direction that he wants to
The key word was reject the finance bill. I mean, that was what was there. Reject the finance bill. But from the look of things, it's more than that. We talk about jobs. And when we talk about jobs, that is the most important thing that's affecting a majority of youth in this country.
The finance bill was a trigger factor. We all know
it's
that.
It's a trigger factor. I agree.
And the issue, as Bill Clinton said during his campaign in 1992, it's the economy, stupid. That's what he said. Right now, all these issues, finance bill, the tax regime, the issue of the country's debt burden, it's the economy, Victor. It is the economy.
So, gentlemen, you agree with me from what you've said, DG, that the issue here was something was bottling up over a period of time. And we are 22 months into this regime, and no action is being taken. And the majority of the youth, all the protesters on the ground are saying, you know what, hold on, this is what's happening, and you have to listen to us. Having that number on the street was so ambushing. Even none of us expected that, even here in the media house. Did you?
Martin Luther King once said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I think any population anywhere in the world, once they know their leaders are just either lying or are managing them, they don't trust such leadership. In Kenya, I've said before, a while ago we had demonstrations in this country that destroyed property. People lost their lives, and the international community put a lot of pressure to leaders, and they formed a committee that did a good work. Now, whatever the Generation Z is being invited to, remember, part of the demonstrations, actually the main thing was issue of taxation, which led to high cost of living. Today, the same thing is coming up again and again. Now, if you did not see any need of implementing the first report, and we are being invited to do another similar thing, Which guarantee do we have as a country that this time round this is going to be implemented? That is the biggest question. Number two, I think I'm talking about leaders, and I'm in that category of those who got elected, and I'm saying we are the ones to blame. Why am I saying this? If this country has institutions that are supposed to be independent, why again do we see mobilization of MPs being called and being given instructions, go and pass this?
They have to do as per the party line and policies.
But again, remember, we are talking on public input. We are talking again, we knew there is that party line when we elected you. It is good you listen. Listening and implementing are two different things. It is good you listen, and once you listen, go and put it into practice. All of us were here when the debate about this finance bill was ongoing. We know how many different sector players who came forward to present their views about the same. Because we are following up what the Constitution dictates about public participation. It beats no logic. If all this is done and at the end of the day, members are whipped to kind of reject all that and pass what we are telling you. I think that is what is coming out. And you know, as Kenyans, we are burdened. And I can tell you, as an expert in international development, by the way, he has reminded me we were together in class at a certain university.
Who was the best?
I will tell you for free that when it comes to developing the country and borrowing from what the late third president of the Republic of Kenya, Emilio Mwai Kibaki, did when he came in, he implemented programs that not anyone anywhere in the world could have realized and agreed this is happening in Kenya. You know, part of it, you must have a tax code. And what tax code means is not necessarily increasing taxes or doubling what citizens are supposed to pay. But which strategies do we have as a country to ensure those who are not within the tax bracket are brought? Hence, expansion of what the country is getting in terms of taxes are concerned. Number two, how again do we look at the issue all around the economy? And all these things, we have answers from the sector players.
Yes.
Because we have, they are the ones who are doing it on a daily basis. Number three, you know, President Kibaki brought the issue of stimulus economic program. It has been done anywhere, and it has brought very good results. Here in Kenya, instead of that, because stimulus program is something that will spread across and to every part of this country. What we are seeing in Kenya today is implementing projects worth billions, because we know what is inside there. Okay? And that is not going to aid this economy. So, to cut my story short, I think we need to listen more, and we need to blame ourselves. And I agree with Javas when he says we need to call ourselves individually and rethink about this country going forward as leaders.
But do you think the mood is fully gone? Because from what we hear is they're also planning to go on the street again tomorrow, Tuesday.
Well, it is within their right. And from where I am, we need somebody to assure us that and assure the country that this will not go like the other committee. Okay? Somebody is going to listen to them. withdrawing the finance bill, what legally it means, we will go back to what we have had.
Yes.
And that is what was being
We also
rejected
have
by
other reports.
yes.
Even the TGRC report is
yes.
still not.
So
we have so
in
many
this,
reports that are still not yet public.
in this case, I think the issue of listening to our people and implementing their wishes is the main thing here.
Yes.
And we are where we are simply because we are not. Can I tell you something? A few months ago.
Maybe you hold that.
Yes.
As I come back to your next one. But let me ask you this on Reverend. Over the past 1 week, people have really blamed the religious sector. I don't want to bring it down to church. The religious sector of not listening to the people when the Gen Z or the protesters or the public in general wanted to go on the street. The church was there saying, "Not, you know what, we reject the finance bill and all that." They feel the fire. But after that, church disappeared, or the religious leaders disappeared, only for them to resurface somewhere with the head of state. And we all know what happened. What do you think is going to happen? We are talking about religious sector and governance. Go ahead.
No, the religious sector is not at the heart of this conversation.
But they play a key role.
They do play a key role, and I think because they are soft targets, most people are trying to use them as scapegoats.
I've given an example. Before that, they said the finance bill was going to be a hard one on Kenyans.
I know that. I know
Right.
they did. The religious leaders did pronounce themselves, and they even did present memoranda before the House Committee, the House Finance and National Development Planning Committee. So they presented their memorandum and they explained exactly why the proposed finance bill, as it was then, was not going to augur well with the population, with the people. Basically, they voiced the voice of the people.
Yes.
And but then and I'd just like to digress a bit and backtrack a bit on something that DG has kept insisting, that there was people who are not involved. I think last year's finance bill and this year's finance bill have really caused an increase in awareness among the citizens about their civic duty, and it's a constitutional and legal imperative that when making laws or regulations or anything that touch on citizens and that affects them directly, they have to be consulted. And the constitutional provision that is available for citizens to be engaged is public participation fora.
Yes.
And so when the House Committee began to conduct public participation, most people said, why should we come and present our views and yet they are not going to be taken in to be considered? And I remember the House Committee Chair, Honorable Kimani Kuria, saying clearly that this public participation exercise will count for something. You will see the report that will come.
Do you think it did?
You will.
Do you think it did?
It sure did. The last time I was here, I did mention some of
But
the...
what was the general expectation from the general public and even other sector players?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You see, when the industry leaders came to present the memorandum, they were against the eco levy, and the House Committee sat. When it came back with the report, they said, okay, we want to give our local manufacturers a competitive advantage in whatever sectors they are involved in. So we will charge eco-levy on imported finished products, which means that those products that are manufactured elsewhere and create jobs for people in those jurisdictions, and if they came here and we charged our people also eco-levy, then they will be disadvantaged.
You know, one thing I picked.
So they did that.
Yes.
Even the bread, the taxes were removed. So, not bread alone, but so many other taxes were reviewed and others deleted, including the motor vehicle levy. So all those things were taken into account. And when the House Committee returned to present its report, remember that the finance bill and the money bill is a government bill. We know all over the world throughout functional democracies that the government always whips their members to make sure that the government agenda, that's why all governments all over the world always strive to have a majority in the House for purposes of pushing their agenda.
I get you, but let me ask you because we're taking a break very shortly, but allow me to ask Javas this before we go on a break.
No, Javas, I want to come back to the issue of the church. So the church leaders now, His Excellency, because you see the church is the place where all those people you see on the streets on Sunday, they retreat to their churches. You see? All those people, when you saw on Monday, on Tuesday, we had millions of people. But on Sunday, they were just a handful. All those people go to churches somewhere. So churches provide an ever-present platform for public engagement.
Which is...
If the clergy are aware of the concerns of the citizens, have an opportunity to speak to them. Actually, if the president had a message that needed to get to the majority of the citizens all at once,
very well,
the church platforms would be the most ideal.
Jaffa's Reverend says that church is being used as a soft target. Well and good, fine. But then the question is, Reverend, again, you'll answer that later on. The church came out openly. I mean, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the media sector players, almost everybody who presented their memoranda there and the public participation said, hold, this is not working. But after that, a day later, we saw a photo of men in cloth and a collar lining with President at State House. And that is the point that a majority of Kenyans, even on social media, said that, you know what, right now we are on our own. Because 2-3 days ago, they said this thing is not working. Then 3 days later, no, hold on, Gen Z, don't go to the street. So it seems that the Gen Z right now are in a straitjacket between a rock and a hard place.
Well, Victor, I wouldn't like to ride the high horse of hyper-rationality in reflecting on that question, because it takes me easily to the philosophical terrain of state and religion, and whether there is need to have a marriage or, in our case, a divorce. When you examine the contents of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, provides clearly that, of course, Kenya is a secular state. It's not a religious state. And that religion and state are very different. Religion as a stakeholder in the place of governance is very important because it's among other stakeholders. You've mentioned manufacturers, students, private sector, civil society, etc. What I know when I look at it wearing the shoes of the common citizen, questions that have been on social media and on the streets, etc., is that, is the church clear-minded when it's engaging with the president, representing the views of the people, or are the religious leaders going there for their own interest? The other question has been that we have seen more of Christian leaders going to State House than Muslim leaders. There have been those kinds of conversations.
Or any other denomination.
Yes.
Right.
What we need to reflect on, therefore, is how do we expand that garment of inclusivity, and that with that garment of inclusivity holding all of us together, should not see that others are preferred much more than others. I agree with Reverend Mark that it is important, and it's true that when a message has to be passed because of the congregation and nature of congregations, it's easy for a message to be passed. But what acts any rational mind is that in the electioneering periods, most of the time, we see some leaders of the religion being politically inclined, others being neutral. And I think that's why when we have this kind of discourse, religious leaders such as Reverend Enchakara here, who is also an expert on leadership and governance, should have a better place to engage even with the head of state than a religious leader who does not have any other expertise. And so for me, I think in terms of engagement, we should have religious leaders with expertise, because by way of wearing a collar does not make you an expert on anything. So we must have that distinction that leaders, and I appreciate, for example, Reverend Enchakara here, who should, leaders and religious leaders such as him, should have an opportunity to engage at state level, at governance level, because they know how to cipher, to understand and engage even with congregation as well as with leaders on matters of leadership and governance. The other thing is who will speak for the silent voices in society? Who will speak for the 12-year boy who was felled by the bullets? Who will speak for the families that are feeling today quite desolate because of the tragedies that have befallen them in the past couple of weeks, having lost loved ones? The state should, the church should. Are we seeing those religious leaders speaking for these depraved families? Are we seeing religious leaders in their totality speaking for the 12-year boy who was felled by the bullets? So when we're reflecting on this, I think what is important is for the church to continue being the salt of the earth. Because as it's written in scriptures, and Reverend Enchakara here could censure me by the wisdom of the teachings, that if the salt has lost its savor, then it should be trampled upon. Today, the kind of conversation we are having should not be about religious leaders telling young people not to go to the streets or telling leaders not to do ABCD. We need religious leaders who are truly the salt of the earth, telling the people and helping even to shape the thinking of leaders as well as the residents or the citizens of this country, that for a community or a society to move forward in the collective sense of that brotherhood that is necessary, let us come together and reason together.
Let's take a break. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us. Gentlemen, we have our cups of coffee. It was getting a bit, yeah. Did you? Yours is not branded. Why?
No, mine and
Reverend.
This
but
is
we are okay.
Anyway. We no hard feelings.
Yeah, we say. But in football, we say goal. Yako and Javas is printed. But nonetheless, we are almost coming to the close of this. But let me ask you, gentlemen, we saw what really happened, and the president was put, at pains again yesterday to explain the criminal justice system that we have seen. That, if you ask me, has put a lot of fear on many people. I believe if you are, caught or you are suspected of doing something, then the courts are always open. But the latest being, former member of parliament who was abducted in broad daylight, but the police also came later on, gave a report that he was summoned, but he did not respond to the summons. Did you very quickly, what do you take home out of that? Because that is, again, the president said it's not going to happen.
There's something, two issues President said last night. One is adherence to the rule of law.
Right.
Number two is he gave undertaking while campaigning that some things will not happen, and he will not allow them to happen as long as he is the president of this country. I think abductions have been increased of late. Remember, the deputy president, while speaking in Mombasa, quoted son to the Attorney General, who had been abducted for more than 48 hours. Alongside others, we also saw a businessman who also got abducted somewhere, and later, after a while, an agreement came up out of that abduction. I think we need to ensure we should not weaponize state institutions to settle political or one-sided or to shut up the critics. And the issue of the rule of law, adhering to the dictates of our constitution and our statutes, I think it is not an optional. A country that encourages those kind of acts is a country that cannot be said to be stable.
Yes.
And my take is we need maybe to change tack and whoever, because sometimes when you see those kind of things happening, maybe it is an informal grouping within the security sector, and not in the normal command, but under command of those in power.
Yes.
And I think that is the perception that comes out. And I think we need to have one central commander in the name of IG, commanding the National Police Service, so that in case of anything, Kenyans can hold that officer, that office to account. And also to the citizens, including leaders, it is also very critical. We also are there to the cause of the law, so that when some of these things happen, like forced arrests, they are not seen like we are. If for sure,
yes,
if for sure, what happened yesterday, particularly in the regard to the former member of parliament. In any case, we were together, by the way, in parliament. He's somebody I know too well, and he knows me too well as well. I think we need to confirm that if for sure there was any summon, and again, somebody of that kind, there's a better way of other than doing something and then we come to defend it. We did this, we did not. It is, we need to do a better job.
Yeah.
We need to do a better job.
I'll give you 1 minute each, the gentlemen, as you also comment on that. But the question I want to ask you, as you know, perhaps as your closing remarks, what do you think is going to be that magic stick that the government is going to use, that is going to bring some sense of sanity between now as we move forward, so that whatever we saw last week does not reoccur moving forward? Go ahead.
I think what is required from where I sit is the need for, in terms of the need for public engagement, is a deliberate investment on the part of government to conduct civic education, so that every time there is a law-making process, that citizens understand that this is a requirement. And the President did say yesterday, the finance bill is not something new. We have had it from independence. Every financial year, we must have a finance bill that says how are we going to fund the budget for that financial year. So it is not something new. So the last 2 years is when we saw a consciousness among citizens in terms of their engagement. So what I feel the government needs to do is that, so that we don't create these gray areas and ambiguity in the manner in which we implement the government programs and the policy, so that people feel that some places they are kept in the dark deliberately, they suspect deliberately. But I feel the government needs to deliberately invest in civic education, so that when it comes to the issue of, say, the budget making process, the government should conduct civic education so that citizens understand the process of making a budget and financing that budget in that financial year. I think that is very important.
Thank you so much. Javas.
Oh, my country, it is of thee. Last night, I heard the president said that he is going to do some soul searching about reconstitution or reorganization of his administration. Last night, I heard the president speak about having been let down by the communication component or the communication arm of his administration. Last night, I heard the president talk about the essence of a country moving forward by way of consensus building. I think we are at a turning point. We are at a moment when we each must ask ourselves, how can we make our country better? When you ask if the issues to do with the abductions or alleged abductions and the issues of the extrajudicial cases that have allegedly been reported, I think, as the poet of yore would put it, and as a lawyer, we always say that seek not to find out for whom the bell tolls, because it tolls for you as well.
Yeah.
We must believe in the rule of law. Yes, the president yesterday talked about the issue and he said he stands on the rule of law. We, as we look at all these things, we must make sure that we put, yes, our country first. Last week's images are images that have put a stain on the conscience of every citizen of this country. And the DG said that when he was out there, it was a pity on his part when it was brought to him that look at what is happening in your country. We are a great country. We are the gateway to the East and the Horn of Africa. It's a country that we must seek to destroy. And Victor, I think I would say that while it's possible that demonstrations are anticipated even in this week and perhaps the week ahead, and those rights of citizens as enshrined in Article 35, 38 and Article 37 of the Constitution, those rights, while they're crucial, we must seek to find ourselves and ask ourselves, for example, when we see demonstrations in continental Europe, when we see demonstrations in America, do we see property destroyed? Do we see people being killed? We don't see police shooting people. We don't see demonstrators torching people's businesses. And I think as a matter of conscience, as right-thinking Kenyans, we ask ourselves, and I ask myself this morning, what is it that I must do better because I am among those who've let this country down because I did not stand up to speak, even to leaders when they were taking wrong decisions. When the media is silent, or at times when the media is engaging in coquetry with the powers that be, it's time that citizens would call out the media for framing issues appearing not to be supporting rights of citizens or even defending the nature of statehood. When religious leaders choose silence when they should speak, we must call out those religious leaders. When members of parliament make choices and decisions that do not favor the citizens, we must call out those members of parliament. And I think in closing, I would say, we have got every opportunity this morning and this moment, today and even moving forward, to make our country better, from the president to the citizen.
Thank you.
Can I say something in a minute?
It is Lord Acton who said power tends to corrupt. Absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. I think in putting our country first, we need also to be sensible. I congratulate our Gen Z. They are getting it right. I sympathize and send my condolences for those to those families who lost their loved ones. I think, although I did not hear it from the executive, but I think it is high time we also, as much as we want to educate the masses, it is also very important we also include in the NPS, National Police Service curriculum, on how to deal with the masses, particularly demonstrations. Because until before anyone was shot, there was no violence. We have seen most of the time whenever our security agencies, and I'm not blaming them because they have the right, the Constitution demands of them to protect both those who are demonstrating and normal Kenyans' life and property. But there has to be balancing, because we have seen whenever there is interference of any kind by our security agents of demonstrations, it turns out. So I think it is high time, as much as we want also to educate the masses, and as much as we are urging anyone in this country planning of any demonstration to remain peaceful, it is also very important we include in the training of our security agencies that aspect of controlling masses. Finally, we need to listen, and I want to put it here. I have no problem with the public participation, but I have a problem when that public participation is conducted and very minimal is included in the final product. Yet that product, the consumers are the ones who are saying, we don't want this, we want this and this and this. And the majority of the people who presented their views in Parliament are people who understand too well this country must run. This country must undertake development. This country has a debt. There are people who understand the importance of taxes. So there has to be that balancing. We need to listen to them and probably put into practice whatever the presentation is. So I think going forward, any country that has developed anywhere in the world, and I challenge anybody here to tell me any country that has, particularly the advanced ones, there was a kind of revolution.
At some point in the
that is, yes. Just look through history of any country. So what Gen Z are doing is also a form of that kind of a thing that is going to put more leaders to account. We be considerate and put our country first. Thank you.
Gentlemen, asante sana for joining us. I mean, we actually, the director has been gracious to us. We've gone past he said, endelea kidogo, wamalize kidogo, which I think is also okay. Javas Bigambo, who is a lawyer and a governance expert, thank you so much for joining me. Reverend Mark Enchakara, who is also transformational leader. I don't know why today my lips is the Luo in me. And the governance expert, as well as Honorable Francis Mwangangi, representing the great people of Machakos County. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Asante sana. But you know what happens? Last week, I think most people had fun. A majority of people never had a selfie with a police officer in full combat. Gen Z had a field day. You know, just making fun out of it. But hey, don't do that again, all right? Let's have a good day. Enjoy your moment. My name is Victor Oloo. Good morning.